Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about what are the differences and what are a low carb, keto, and Atkins diets. Now before we begin, I just want to remind you to subscribe on the button below or to click the notification bell to be notified every time there's a new video about health and wellness, life coaching, relationships, and all the things you need to have a beautiful life. Okay, so first of all, before we begin, why would anyone even be interested in or consider doing any kind of low carb diet or lifestyle? Well, it's scientifically proven as well as anecdotally proven that people can have all kinds of health and weight loss benefits from doing a low carb lifestyle if that works for them. So you can lose weight easier. If you have a family history of diabetes, metabolic syndrome, or blood sugar issues, a low carb lifestyle could be for you. If you've had gestational diabetes in any of your pregnancies, a lower carb lifestyle might be better for you. If you've had cardiac symptoms, if you tend to gain weight in your belly and have belly fat, if you tend to get hangry, hungry, and anxious a lot, or you get extreme hunger, if you have had problems, with brain fog, forgetting, fatigue, or if you have, parents or grandparents who have had dementia or Alzheimer's, these are also signs that a lower carb lifestyle might be better for you. If you need to increase your HDL, your good cholesterol, then another reason why low carb might behoove you. If you've had teeth problems, a lot of cavities, gum disease, if you've needed root canals more often than is normal, these are all signs that you might have blood sugar that's out of control and inflammation in your body, and that a low carb lifestyle may be for you. And finally, if you've had cherry moles, growths, polyps, if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, meaning multiple cysts on your ovaries, endometriosis, these are all sources of inflammation that have shown benefit from a lower carb lifestyle to reduce inflammation and the manifestations of all these diseases. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, let's talk about what these different eating styles are and really what's the difference. Just to start, a low carb or low carbohydrate lifestyle or diet style is one usually that's defined as eating 130 carbs or lower. Some people would go down to 100 and say 100 carbohydrates or lower. Well, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are the sugars in our foods, usually primarily in plant foods. But there are different types of carbohydrates. There are the types that influence or spike our blood sugars more than others. And that's where the whole issue of whether we're talking total carbs or net carbs come in. There is a simple equation to know the difference between a total carbohydrate and a net carbohydrate. And basically a net carbohydrate is your total carbohydrates minus your fibers, minus some people would say glycerin, minus sugar alcohols, and that's how you would get your total carbohydrate number. Now, if you are living in Europe or countries outside of the United States, sometimes the carbohydrate number on packages or on food is already a net carb number because the packaging standards in the United States are different from other countries. So sometimes you already are getting the net carbs because it's already being subtracted out on the packaging in other countries or other areas such as Europe. So find out what the system is in your country. Why you would choose one over the other, some people feel that total carbohydrates is more appropriate, being that not everybody is uninfluenced by fiber, carbs, or sugar alcohols, etc. Some people actually do have a blood sugar reaction even to fiber and blood sugar alcohols or glycerin. So particularly on packaged foods, you need to be careful and you need to get to see what works for you. Obviously, if you're following a net carb, counting your carbs as net carbs, it will be easier because you will be able to eat more carbs and a larger variety of foods. So you might want to play with net carbs first, and if you see that's not working for you, then you might want to switch to the total carb number. So we got low carbs, under 130 or depending who you're talking to, 100 carbs a daily, either net or total, based on what works for you. The low carbohydrate lifestyle is going to be the most flexible of these three styles, low carb, keto, or Atkins, in the sense that you get a greater number of carbs, so you eat a greater variety of foods, and you're going to be able to socialize easier. It's just going to be easier to implement. However, if you are having that higher carb lifestyle, you may not see the same amount of benefit in terms of weight loss and your health markers. So, when you come into this, see what your goal is and see if, when starting higher up with the low carb lifestyle, if you're able to achieve your goals. If not, then you might need one of the lower carb lifestyles. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to talk about is the ketogenic lifestyle. So ketogenic is basically when you're having under 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates a day, depending on which specialist you talk to. Again, some people will say net carbs, some will say total carbs, some experts will say both. So again, it's really about finding what is effective for you in terms of reaching whatever your weight loss or health marker goals are. And this is going to be the most restrictive of the lifestyles. And you're really going to be specifically basing your meals around the proteins and the fats and the very low carb vegetables, the green leafy vegetables, etc., as the base of your meals. And then last is Atkins. So everyone says, what's the difference between Atkins and keto? Well, really, the first stage of Atkins, that they call induction, is the same as the ketogenic lifestyle. The difference is in the Atkins program, they advocate for doing this purely ketogenic lifestyle only for the first 2 weeks, so that you can bring your blood sugars down, retrain your body and see some initial weight losses, and teach your body how to have higher ketones and burn fat instead of sugar as a primary fuel source. And then after 2 weeks, you start going into new phases. So Atkins has several phases. And in each phase, what you do is you start increasing a new level of foods or a new amount of carbohydrates. You'd go in after your first week of 20 grams for 2 weeks. Your second phase, you would start adding a little bit of nuts, a little bit more low carb vegetables, and some fruits like berries or low carb fruits. In the third phase, you would start getting closer to your goal weight. You'd be allowed to add even more carbs, depending on how you read the program, between 5 and 10 carbs. And you would do that until you see that your weight loss is stopping. And then at that point, wherever you see that your weight loss stops, you'll know that that's the carbohydrate point that you need to hold for maintenance. And so basically on the Atkins program, you're customizing your carb level more to what works for you in terms of your goals. So it's kind of in between keto and a low carb lifestyle. So the basic principles of all these lifestyles, the number one would be avoid your sugars, avoid white flour products, avoid white rice, avoid everything that's white, avoid sodas, avoid added sugars, try to drink just water, teas and coffees. The next principle is to drop the concept of low fat foods, but instead to look out for carbs instead of fats. So if you're going to buy dairy products particularly, you're going to go for the full fat versions. A lot of people on low carb will be having heavy cream or half and half instead of milk because the carb content is so low. In addition, trying to look out, when you're choosing your serving sizes, looking for between 0 and 5 carbs, maximum 10 carbs in a serving size of something, depending on whether you're doing keto, Atkins, or low carb. Also watching out for creepy carbs, starting to read ingredients and make sure there's no added sugars. And sugars is not only sugar, it's corn syrup, it's dextrose, it's maltodextrin. There's several different forms of sugars. It's honey. So really starting to become more aware of added sugars in the foods that you're eating. And just trying to eat more, natural foods in terms of proteins and veggies. In a gist, you're going to be building your meals around protein, lots of leafy green vegetables and other vegetables, natural fats. Depending on whether you're doing Atkins and Keto, Atkins is more moderate fat and higher protein. And Keto can sometimes be a higher fat or a higher protein, depending on what works better for you or what version of Keto you're following. Besides avoiding low fat, you want to avoid starches, grains, big quantities of fruits, and even legumes. So if you're doing the low carb lifestyle or the last phases of Atkins, you can have some grains and some fruit and some legumes, but you're going to keep your quantities much lower than a standard diet by having, first of all, looking at serving sizes, but for instance, you'd have a quarter cup of rice as opposed to a cup of rice. You would have half a piece of fruit or even a few slices of fruit instead of the entire fruit. If you're going to be doing beans or legumes, you would have a couple tablespoons or a quarter cup and not a half cup or a cup of, let's say, hummus or beans. So that's kind of how you would build your meals. So next, I'm curious, have you ever done a low carb diet? And if so, what have you found that works or doesn't work for you? I find that if you want to go into a low carb diet, it is really important to build yourself a community of people that are doing a similar lifestyle so that you can learn recipes, so that you can get tools and tricks, and so that you can have other people that are in the same place as you, because it's about relearning a whole new way of cooking, of eating, of creating your meals. And the more ideas you get, the easier the lifestyle becomes. And also sometimes if you're having moments where this carb addiction creeps back in, because basically if you find the low carb lifestyle works for you, it could be that you had a carb addiction or that you had a body that was particularly sensitive to carbs or sugar. And so it's like any other kind of addiction, like an alcohol addiction. If you find yourself in scenarios where there's more of it around, you can fall back into the habit and have a harder time sticking to the lifestyle. So it's going to be about avoiding bringing these foods into your home, changing the way you perceive a food. And also in social circumstances, you might find that people around you pressure you, oh, come on, live a little, or the food that's being served, it's harder for you to find choices. So it's really about learning a variety of different strategies to be able to live this lifestyle happily. Please do share this video if you have anybody that's interested in the low carb lifestyle but's feeling a little bit confused, not understanding what it really means or what the differences are. I believe that after listening to this video, they will get the basics so that it will become easier after this to go and decide which one of the low carb programs is of interest to them if they are interested in low carb. A final note, if you happen to eat more vegetarian or are more of a vegan, it still is possible to have a low carb lifestyle. However, your carb content will automatically be higher because most of the foods that a vegetarian would eat would tend to be higher in carbs, like beans, like nuts, like soy. So just be aware that you're going to play with your numbers a little bit more, and that it might be a little bit easier if you are doing the vegetarian lifestyle, if you are an ovo-lacto vegetarian, meaning that you are able to have dairy and eggs, but it is still possible on a vegan lifestyle, and people have seen many benefits as well. Wishing you many blessings. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Have a wonderful day.